something
A
like
long
that.
time.
A long time. So,
Hundreds of years, yeah.
so the funny thing, I don't know if it's not funny is the wrong word, but the interesting thing in that was that when sugar takes off in Hawaii, what's happening is the civil war in between the North and the South. So sugar was no longer being sent from the South to the North. So the Hawaiian sugar planters were like, okay, good.
So in the 1800s.
In the 1800s.
Early 1800s.
Yeah.
Wow.
They start planting sugar. I don't exactly know the date off the top of my head, but the first Chinese immigrants who come in to start to work on the plantations is like 1860 something, right? And the Civil War is when in the 60s, right? Isn't it early? We got to check our dates here.
Yeah, I know. It's before that because the thing was signed in, I think, was it 1864?
Was the end of the war.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so even, right? So if it's the early 60s, 1860s, you're still at this time that, there's no products being sent from the South. So anyway, so the early plantation owners are like, okay, let's, get this sugar industry going, and this is how they're making their money. So from that time period, once those sugar planters gained control of land and money, and they didn't have enough human resources to plant the sugar, which is extremely laborious, which is why it was a slave crop, because who the hell wants to do sugar? It's so horrible. Then they started to bring in the Asian immigrants. So I would say one of the early waves, my Chinese side of the family comes over. My great-great-grandfather comes through Hong Kong. He was originally, I think, Guangdong province or something, comes through Hong Kong in 1876 or something. So, kind of early in that period.
Right.
So wait, I know we're trying to answer. So what happens is, so once those American, missionary families gain a foothold in the money and the land, they obviously need the royalty to acquiesce to their demands of how they want to do trade with the United States and everyone else. So they start to plot against the royalty. And at this point, it's David Kalakaua, and they make him sign a treaty with the United States, and there's something called the Bayonet Constitution or something, and they made him sign off on a bunch of stuff. Kalakaua ends up dying early from some illness, and so his sister becomes the queen, Liliuokalani. Right. And so she rules for about 3 years. And in the meantime, these planters, these businessmen keep taking more and more control till they're finally like, okay, you know what? I also think there's a little sexism involved. Like, I don't think they would have maybe necessarily just rolled through Hawaii and grabbed the monarchy if a male king was still. But when they saw this woman, holding the seat, they're kind of like, okay, let's just take it over. So they literally, with the backing of the U.S. Marines, now not the government itself, like they didn't communicate with the president, who was Grover Cleveland or somebody at the time. They just, like, with the backing of the ambassador to Hawaii from the United States and the U.S. military Marines who were stationed in Honolulu Harbor, they literally marched through downtown with their guns, got to the palace, Iolani Palace, surrounded it, and said, "Ours." I mean,
that's just to go back to the gender thing, like I think that would have happened just because that was, yes, I totally agree with what you're saying, but I also think that, like, at that time, American imperialism, like,
it was already on the roll.
It was happening everywhere in Latin America. Like, this is just the way the U.S. operated, and then the CIA later, like, it's just continued on and on.
It's true. Yeah.
This is just the way they operate. This is ours for the taking, and that's it. And it was, I don't know if, like, those companies like Dole, like, if that's also where they came from, or Dole, were they later?
Yeah, Dole. So Dole, who started in sugar and went to pineapple. Absolutely, Dole was one of the descendants of the missionary family. Yeah,
and then later bananas, right?
Also bananas. I think they did different things in different parts of the world. Yeah, I don't know if they had
Dole and Chiquita. I know they did a lot.
Yeah. But Dole was in Sanford. Okay, wait. So the Dole family, the guy who starts the plantation is the nephew of Sanford Dole, who was one of the conspirators of the takeover of the government, who he also was a lawyer and became one of the first judges in the islands.
Interesting.
So he was,
basically what Mitch McConnell is doing right now.
Yeah.
Setting up all the judges. It just,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so let's bring this back. So, I love all this history. Yeah. This is why we always have these great conversations, and Professor Moon is very appropriate. Like we just always have all this amazing stuff to
discuss.
Yes, to discuss, to educate us all. But as far as surfing is concerned, and as far as I guess we got into all this because it was about the overall kind of culture of Hawaii, which is completely related to obviously its history, the history of U.S. imperialism, and the culture that breeds as well, and that infiltrates and shifts. So, like the history of surfing in Hawaiian culture, it was very equal in terms of gender.
In the old days, pre-contact.
Right. And then the missionaries with the, oh my God, naked bodies and, leisure, and they just try to eradicate that from the culture. Saw, I don't know, maybe they saw it as this kind of like pagan kind of ritual, or I don't know, I feel like that is somehow connected to.
As far as the reading that I came across, what it seemed like the missionaries, first of all, the missionaries did not like naked bodies, and there were a lot of scantily clad bodies. They hated it no matter what.
Yeah, that was a sign of barbarianism, and wherever they went in the world.
But what they hated the hula the most. Like they really went after the hula.
Gyrations.
They hated the gyrations and the gyrations, they really went about condoning the hula, and the hula did go underground because of the intense, hatred of it.
Wow.
But surfing was a little bit mixed. How they went after surfing was, because the missionaries were, Puritans, and they thought you should work. It was a work ethic. So if you are not working during the day, you're not being a good citizen. You're not being a good person. You're just a barbaric heathen if you're out there. And back in the day, there are these Hawaiian legends where people would be out in the fields tending the taro. They look over, or they see a sign, a flag goes up on one of the heiaus, which is the temples. There were temples dedicated to surf. And if the surf was up, like Diamond Head, there was a heiau. Oh my goodness, I can't remember the name off the top of my head. There was a heiau where now there's a school that's there. But a flag would go up, which meant surf's up. People would drop their tools and go down to the beach and surf. Like, for real. This is not some made up stuff that here we are in the modern age. Oh yeah, I'm going to call into work and say I'm sick, or, let me skip class. I'm going to go surfing. Like, the Hawaiians did that. It was acceptable. If it was good surf, you knew that gods were sending waves. So
I love it.
Miss an appointment with.
Oh my God, I must have been Hawaiian in many past lives.
I think there are a lot of surfers who really, that ethic is real, because it's a special day. If there's a real swell that comes in, it's like, oh, it's a date with Moana, the ocean.
I think that's really beautiful as far as, I guess people who do outdoor sports, but especially with surfing, because it really is kind of like paying homage to nature, right? Like nature dictates our relationship to time and our relationship to activity and how we organize our life, right? So, I feel like that still exists now, right? Like if there's a wave, you especially in New York, because we don't have conditions ideal, every day. So when it hits, we're on it. If you're not on it,
you
missed it. And so, it's like being able, I feel like it's such a gift to be able to be in this urban environment and to still be connected to what is the moon doing right now? What's the wind doing? What's, what direction is the swell coming in? What direction is the wind coming in? Always when you're in this urban landscape, kind of
Yeah.
like looking up and noticing things because you're assessing what nature is doing.
Yeah.
And to have that connection despite the urban jungle is
Yeah.
just, I love it. And I feel like it's at the minimal, like, it's funny when most people are like, you can surf in New York, and it's like, wow, there's an ocean here. And so this idea of being connected to nature and knowing what we're living in and not being caught up in this kind of tunnel vision of our urban realities, and that as a metaphor for, everything, for life, like that we're disconnected from this larger thing. So maybe let's bring this fast forward to New York. So you had this beautiful Hawaiian kind of.
Yeah. I mean, it boggles my mind that I moved to New York.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not surf for 25 years. Like when
Early
I moved,
90s,
when I moved to New York, I just didn't. I was like, okay, I came to New York to live in the urban jungle. I came to be an artist. I came to pursue all these things which I thought were so romantic when I was in Hawaii. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Skyscrapers and, concrete everywhere and muggers and like, music and bars and whatever, art galleries and all this stuff. And surfing just was like something from my past, along with my own identity of being a Hawaiian island born local girl.
Mm-hmm.
And, so even when I would meet people and I would, say, hey, I'm from Hawaii, and people would not be able to identify my race. And, just that ambiguity about my past was not something that anyone had a context for. So that also I just kind of like put aside.
Mm-hmm. So you were able to kind of construct your own new identity.
Yeah. I mean, I did construct a new identity, but like, you don't really think about how much your identity is informed by how people also see you, because then you sort of reflect it in them in some way. Because if they put you in context, like, oh, you're a queer person, or you're a gender non-conforming person, or you're a whatever it is, you're said of, you're Asian in some way, or you're a person of color somehow. Like, people put you in, and you understand when you're interacting with them that you're they're trying to figure out where to place you in their own context, whatever their background might be. So like with that, I just felt like, oh yeah, I'm an artist. I'm a queer person. I'm a multiracial person, but it wasn't ever, Hawaii was not ever really a part of something that my experience could be conveyed to someone else. So people could understand Hawaii, but when people thought Hawaii in their brain, some other image popped up in their head, a palm tree and a hula girl, I don't know what. But in my mind, Hawaii has a very different and multifaceted, meaning, construct. And so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. When I started surfing again here, it was almost like a little cork had been unplugged, and all my Hawaiian-ness started to flood forth. And I realized like, oh, my whole foundation is built upon this fact that I grew up in these islands. I had this experience of culture. I had this experience of race. I had this experience of the ocean. I had this experience of living in a very small, contained geography in which you always knew where you were in relationship to the sun, in relationship, to north, south, east, west, based upon how the islands are configured. And you were never lost. Like, you just couldn't get lost. And there's something about that gives you a sense of security that, I mean, not having grown up somewhere else where I feel like you grew up, in New York, where I think you probably were more on guard earlier. You understood how to be on guard earlier on in your life. Like you didn't have to be on guard in Hawaii. You didn't lock your doors. I mean, as kids, we roamed around. I don't know if my parents ever knew where we were.
I had that too in New York. Like I was a latchkey kid, but like I had the responsibility. Like I had to kind of be tough on my own because I was out there. But I feel like it was less scary, in the 70s in New York City for a kid than it is now in a different way. I don't know. Like, I feel like if I had a kid, I'd be scared for them to be out. Like, I'd always be worried. But
I don't know. Maybe we know more about the dangers.
Yeah, exactly. there's a lot to be afraid of. I mean, I got mugged. Like bullies would come up to me. There was always something. It was definitely